Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the public board meeting of September 26, 2023 for School District 72, Campbell River. The Campbell River Board of Education would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territories of the Liquido Nations and the communities, and the city of Campbell River is surrounded by the communities of the Weevilkai and Weevilcum Nations. Please note that there is a short production delay between the live event that you are viewing and the meeting participants. The question and answer function is open online for questions on agenda items throughout this meeting, and a final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and questions will be addressed before the end of the meeting. So this evening, for my chairperson's remarks, I'd like to acknowledge that this evening we'll be hearing from Corey Vanderhorst of MNP Accounting regarding SD72's annual financial audit. Fiduciary oversight of the public funding provided to education through the Ministry of Education and Childcare is one of the core responsibilities that we, your Board of Trustees, are tasked with in our roles. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our Finance Department, led by Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick, for their efforts to not only manage the day-to-day financial work, but also their plain language presentations to the board and community stakeholders. Information regarding SD72's budget for the year ended June 30th, 2023 can be found on the school district website. I'd also like to just acknowledge and thank Lorraine for filling in this evening for our executive assistant, Natalie Crawshaw, as she's taking some much deserved vacation time. So on Saturday, September 16th, trustees were invited to celebrate alongside CUPE 723 as they honored 65 years of service to the students here in SD72 Campbell River. I'd like to thank President Andrea Craddock and her team for a great event. To all CUPE staff, both past, present, and future, to let you know that you are seen in your work supporting students, facilities, transportation, administration, and grounds. You are key components in our education system. The weekend of October 13th and 14th will see trustees traveling to Nanaimo for our semi-annual VISTA meeting. The acronym VISTA, and there's lots of acronyms in education, stands for the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association and represents one of 8 regions across the province. The theme of these meetings will continue to engage trustees around the learning series of Leadership for Continuous Improvement, Student Improvement, and provides a forum in which we discuss local trends, celebrate best practices, and share any concerns that we might see in our districts. Reports will be shared at the public board meeting on October 17th. I would like to take this opportunity to share some information about events happening this Saturday, September 30th, in honoring of National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Events start at 11 a.m. at the Spirit Square, and there will be a march of an Every Child Matters march that usually does the blocks around the downtown core, followed by a light lunch and an invitation to witness the celebration of residential school survivors. I'd like to acknowledge Liquido Family Life Society and their role in organizing this event and coordinating this event for the last 8 years. For those of you who aren't aware, Liquido Family Life has been in the community for over 30 years, and they originally began their purposes to provide support to Indigenous women, children, and families suffering in modern day Campbell River. And finally, I just want to share an experience that I had today at Cedar Elementary. I was invited to Cedar Elementary by one of the kindergarten teachers and the administrator there to discuss and support a family learning workshop series that they're hoping to offer to the parents of kindergarten students. What they're hoping to do is they're pulling together community supports to offer a celebration for parents and some resources, some take-home resources, and instruction around how to best support their child at home in their learning, in their literacy learning. I just want to acknowledge the amazing efforts that educators make to engage parents and the differences that will make in literacy outcomes moving forward. And that's it for me. Moving on to our superintendent's remarks.
I'd just like to say, make a comment publicly on what a fantastic startup I've experienced here in Campbell River. I've been welcomed amazingly and seen some wonderful things. I completed just about all of my school visits. Last week we visited Quadra Island. I only have Cortez and Sur Gennaros to get to, which I plan on getting to before the month of October ends. So that's been really exciting, just getting to put my eyes on all the different sites. I will be starting some more comprehensive school visits, visiting all the school principals and vice principals to get to know them a little bit and ascertain some site-specific needs that they may have. So I'm looking forward to those visits and gaining more information from them. I also had the opportunity to visit all the daycare sites, and that's a very exciting thing that's happening. And it's just from my office window, I can look across the space and see the Pinecrest daycare being built day by day. So that's been exciting, and looking forward to those getting wrapped up. Just to dovetail on what you were saying, Chair Eddie, is reconciliation activities in our schools will be taking place on Friday. Everything from pancake breakfasts to community walks to assemblies featuring some of the local chiefs in the area. So looking forward to taking part in many of those activities. And just a reminder for everyone publicly that Monday is the day that we will honor the stat holiday, so there won't be any school on Monday, but it's been a great startup, and thank you, Campbell River.
Awesome. Thank you, Superintendent Manning. So moving forward to approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 5th, 2023, and the motion reads that the minutes of the meeting of September 5th, 2023 are hereby approved as circulated. Moved by trustee. Wow, I just got that. Harper, and seconded by trustee Gladish. Sorry, Dave. All those in favor? Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, are there any additions or alterations to the agenda?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add the district principal of inclusive education learning services to the agenda, please.
Perfect. We'll put that under 14G, under business administration. Principal. Okay. Are there any further alterations to the agenda? Seeing none, the motion reads that the agenda is hereby approved as amended. Trustee Gillis, seconded by trustee Hagan. All those in favor? And to Vice Chair Gillis regarding the reported board decisions from the September 26th.
Yes, we discussed matters dealing with teaching, administrative and support, staff changes, and property, legal and financial matters.
Thank you, Vice Chair Gillis. Item 8, there's no correspondence to report. Item 9 is a public submission on behalf of the Greenway School Program Report of 2022-23. So Greenway's Land Trust did a beautiful report to share with us as trustees some of the work that they're doing alongside our district to support learning in the natural environment. And so we'll accept that report. Thank you to Greenway's Land Trust. Oh, trustee Matt.
I was wondering if this might be made available to our student leadership group, because one of the concerns that comes up often there is one of how our schools and our district are responding to the challenges of climate change. And so don't you think they would like to see this? Yeah.
Sure. We can reach out to Greenway's Land Trust and just make sure that we were good to share this publicly. I'm sure that we will be. And we could task a staff member with passing that along to the student group. Or was that something that you would like to do at your next meeting?
Well, I'm sort of a fracture at that party. So I often, the superintendent, I think, brings resources. So maybe I might ask if you could provide that at the next.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Perfect. So There are no agenda submissions or educational submissions, so we're on to electric and board of matters, which is the presentation of the audited financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2023. I'd like to welcome Corey Vanderhorst from MNP up to present.
Okay, so if you have your agendas, Corey's going to be referring to page numbers in the financial statements as we kind of hop back and forth, and he connects all the numbers for you.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the board for inviting me here to speak today. My name is Corey Vanderhorst, audit partner with MNP. Take you through some highlights of the financial statements. Before I start, a big thank you to the Secretary Treasurer and his team and staff throughout the district to help out with the audit. It goes very smoothly as always, so we very much appreciate that. I am going to start on page 4 if you're following along. So it's the statement of financial position. I'm going to skip quickly past the audit report. Not that exciting. It is a clean audit opinion again for many years in a row. So we are satisfied these financial statements are prepared accurately in all material respects in accordance with the appropriate government reporting standards. So that's that easy part. So if everybody's on page 4, statement of financial position starts at the top with your financial assets, cash and cash equivalents. So we'll take you through a snapshot. Again, this is what was in the accounts at June 30th. So sometimes there's timing things between year over year, but the district had cash and cash equivalents of 19.6 million at the end of last school year. There's always a little bit of receivables amounts coming in through the summer or into the fall. The total financial assets of $20.8 million, very similar to the prior year. On the liability side, regular accounts payable are very consistent. It was about $9 million at the end of the year. There is a deferred revenue of $1.6 million rolling over into the current fiscal period. The big number in liabilities is deferred capital revenue. It's important to note that is not a cash balance owing. What that represents is ministry funding over the years that is used to purchase capital. In that $64 million, there's $5.7 million of unspent capital rolling over into the current fiscal. Important to note that the rest of it is just money spent in the past. There's a quirk of how we account for it and the way we put it in the financial statements. Then there's 1.5 million of employee future benefits. That's the long-term estimate for the staff of their retirement and sick and severance benefits. And the new number this year is the asset retirement obligation. So I'm sure Kevin has talked to you about this a few times. It's new this year. You can actually see that it was reported what we call retroactively for 2022, that there's $14.1 million. The same number in both years, meaning there was basically no remediation activity between the 2 years. What this number represents is an estimate of the contamination, the asbestos, lead paint, other types of materials which are now no longer used, but back when the schools were built, they were those materials were in play. And as total estimate of the cleanup costs involved in those. Again, you're not paying that out next year, this year, you're not paying it out tomorrow. As renovations of schools happen or anything changes, the regulations around asbestos, so you don't need to do anything about it until you rip it up. So over time, this number will change. We do also expect that you will refine this number over the years as estimates get better, as capital plans change. This number could potentially change, go up, go down. It's not going to be a static number of that $14 million. And then so you have a net debt position that is now looks worse than last year, but that is it's an accounting calculation. I wouldn't focus in on it as a debt figure, but it's $70.8 million. Then you get the non-financial assets, your tangible capital assets, so buildings, everything you can touch, vehicles and equipment. There was $2.8 million of purchases through the year, as well as some work in progress to bring that total up to about $3.3 million of new capital, but then depreciation on the existing assets of $4.4 million. So we get a net drop from $80 million to 78.9, just about $1 million, just over $1 million drop in the book value there. And at the end of this document, you see an accumulated surplus number of $8.5 million, Important to note that these financial statements are the operating fund, capital fund, and some reserves. So that $8.5 million is not a cash surplus position. It's an accounting surplus that includes all the capital and all the other balances. I think in Kevin's report, we'll talk a little bit about what the operating balances are looking like. On the next page, page 5, you get the statement of operations, or what we used to call the income statement. So here you can see total revenues that increased $5.2 million from 74.5 to $79.8 million. The biggest increase first being ministry funding, that has increased $4.3 million. And as you'd expect, expenses have also increased. So expenses have increased almost $3.5 million from 76.9 to 80.4. But important to note that expenses coming in under budget. Overall budget was 80.7 and actual expenses were 80.4. So you have an accounting deficit position of 628,000. But again, we're bringing the capital and the operations and all the other funds together to show that overall deficit position. The last page I'll take you, I'll get you to skip to page 7, which is statement 5 and the statement of cash flows. So I talked about a lot of accounting adjustments and the way accountants present these financial statements. This cash flow statement is more in line with how you're thinking when you look at the budget. This is just what happened in the main bank accounts. So here, the first subtotal is the total operating position. So the $924,000 cash outflow. Capital transactions, as I mentioned, there was $3.3 million of total capital purchases. 483,000 of that is ongoing projects that rolled over into the summer. To fund that, there was $3,483,000 capital funding received. So the main bank accounts had a net decrease of $760,000. One thing I do also want to draw your attention to is that if you look at last year's numbers, there was $6 million of capital funding received and only 2.4 spent. So some of that cash outflow this year is money rolling over from 2022 into some of the capital projects that were going on throughout the year. So I'll pause there. And I'm happy to answer questions either now or after Secretary Treasurer's report.
Can you explain to me, kind of in plain language, what the asset retirement obligation and the new laws around that mean in public funds?
Sure, that's a great question, important one. So one of the things that it's important to note is all the rules, regulations, Ministry of Environment rules are the same. And in the past, you had known about all of the any issues in cleanup. In fact, in prior years, we were looking for contaminated sites. You don't have any. What's changed is the accounting standards that sit in Toronto decided it would be better for organizations to understand what's the cost potentially coming online. So we looked at the reports, we looked at all the information, both the information that your school district has, information that the ministry has around all the schools that you're managing, and looked at, how much asbestos is possibly in those schools, how much lead paint and other contaminants, and then estimated what would the cost of cleanup be. So the ministry provided a cost per square meter of asbestos and the cost per square meter on lead paint. And then their staff used that to calculate this number based on a school by school basis. One of the things about that estimate is it had a lot of support behind it. The ministry has a nice engineer's report on the value, but it's actually a higher cost per square meter than we're seeing in practice. If you went next summer and did a remediation project at this school, the ministry value was $260 per square meter of cleanup. We're seeing quotes come in from hazmat companies lower than that. So that's one of the things that we're talking about, is potentially that $14 million number changes. If you get into a project, you get some actual invoices, actual costs of what it could cost for cleanup, those numbers might come down. Bearing in mind, of course, that cleanup at a school down the street is going to be a different price than cleanup on Quadra or Cortez, because you're going to have extra trucking and shipping costs. So there's no flat rate for the entire district, depending on how far some of your schools are from the landfill, or the ones on Outer Islands, they'll have more costs.
Trustee Hickenpole or trustee Bills?
Yeah, could you just talk a little bit, I'm not sure who, on the safety of the buildings, if there's lead paint and asbestos in them, just to reassure the public as to safety for kids.
Absolutely. That's what I can start, and if anybody wants to jump in. It's very important to note that while we're going through an accounting exercise and coming up with the cost, there is no change in the safety of the children from last year to this year. It's everything that we understand from Ministry of Environment regulations is don't touch it, and there is a risk to to the students or the staff for anybody using the school, right? I'm not an engineer, I'm not a hazmat specialist. There's some level of risk in anything, but it's important to note that that risk hasn't changed from last year to this year. That's not causing us to put the number on.
Yes, and through the years, looking back, supporting materials for MNP this year, we've had 3 different assessments performed by companies taking a look at various potential hazardous materials, and if any one of them had seen something, it would have been addressed immediately. So again, there's no open ongoing health risk or safety risk for students or staff. But again, when we go to potentially update like major renovations or remove buildings, we will have to take some of these additional precautions.
Thank you. Trustee Bills?
Just a follow-up from the previous, is this an item more that will escalate each year? Is this assessment redone each year, or is it something we could anticipate might decrease over time?
It's a little fuzzy. My gut is it decreases as you refine some of those estimates instead of using some of the ministry numbers. But it will definitely change year over year. Anytime you get into a project and do any sort of work, it should drop the liability. There's the possibility for it to increase if something changes in ministry regulations. So it's Ministry of Environment regulations around cleanup, it could increase the number. One of the things that is important for all the school districts in the province is because of the way the regulations are around asbestos, that you don't have to do anything until you change or renovate a school. There's no timing estimated here. There's no saying this school 20 years out, this school 5 years out. It's just the cost estimate as if you were to do it tomorrow. So if we get into a scenario where it starts to go on the capital plan and it's 5 years out, you might put a time estimate to it. And depending on inflation and some of the costs, depending on what interest rates are doing, that actually might spike the value temporarily for that school. So it is possible to see swings up. Quite likely it's a swing down, but it will definitely be a living, breathing number that changes every year.
Okay, thank you for that.
Any further questions?
Yeah, thank you, Corey. Yeah, I want to thank MNP for the work that they did this year. They had another good crew in. It's kind of the culmination of summer, so all the hard work that our finance staff do through summer ends with a visit from MNP, and it's a bit of a celebration and a relief because by the time MNP comes, all that hard work's been done, and they did a really good job this year. And so it's always nice to get the visit from Corey and his staff, the audit team.
Thank you. So on to 12B, which is the financial statement discussion and analysis by Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yeah, so as you can see in our financial statements, there's lots of data, and the important thing that Corey had mentioned is that it does come in 3 parts. It's the statements at the beginning are consolidated. It's the operating, it's capital, and it's a special purpose fund statements all rolled into one. What I get to do with the financial statement discussion and analysis is I get to go through all the important lines of it and explain if there's differences, why some of the differences are there. in this financial statement discussion and analysis, I'll pick up different highlights. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it because I'm not going to read it tonight. What I do just want to share with the board though, is there are some highlights that can come out of it. There's the 1 minute version, or there's the, I don't know, 15-minute read, but the highlights that I'd like to share with the board really come on the operating side. Touched on some of this at the last meeting as well with the appropriations, but overall, our operating surplus increased by $55,000, which is a small amount, but it's a long place from where we came last year, where we were down $2.3 million. So a very big turnaround. When we pull some of the savings that were spent within our operating budget, we actually can identify that our discretionary operating surplus was closer to $475,000. So if we hadn't spent the savings, we would have seen a surplus of $475. Again, very, very big change. And it really kind of demonstrates we made some very difficult cuts. Operations staff, schools have had to operate under a more stringent fiscal environment through the past year. And this acknowledges that as a school district, everybody did a really good job because we've got a handle on our inflationary costs and on our sick replacement costs. Part of why it went to $2 million and drew down such a surplus is it was difficult to find out what those estimates were as we were in the middle of really pandemic related escalations. But we have a handle on those costs, and that's represented by the surplus that we have. Another highlight that we have is last year, the Student and Family Affordability Fund was another initiative by the government to help reduce costs for families. We received $603,000, and we had a great plan for it, but we still only spent about $350,000. So the province is allowing us to retain that money and continue that program in for this next year. So we still have about $268,000 available, and that's in addition to the Feeding Futures. So the student and family affordability was to offset increasing costs, school supplies, like transit items, food for families, whereas the Feeding Futures, it feels similar, but it's just going to be focused on food. So the nice part is that with some student and family affordability left over, we can still continue some of the supports that families relied on us last year. Another big highlight in here, the board had a presentation a little earlier, the confidential, about the childcare. So $8 million project being added to our books. So that's going to impact capital assets. That's going to impact some of our deferred. But anytime you see those numbers going up, it's good because it means you're getting something. So that'll be a very positive addition. We started it in this financial year, but we will finish it in the next school year. Now, the only area of concern that I did want to bring up, again, our finance staff, Renee, Assistant Secretary of Treasurer at the time, went through every single budget and adjusted for those inflationary amounts. And again, I feel like we did a really good job of estimating correctly. The one item that we weren't able to really estimate closely is the employee benefits. So when you look in the operating financial statements, you will see that employee benefits are substantially over cost of what the budget is. And there's a couple reasons for it that we're monitoring and we will address in this final budget. But some of the reasons that we feel that has happened is through COVID, a lot of employees didn't use their benefits. And then once the pandemic was over, they caught up on really, in effect, 2 years of benefits. But that was at the same time that the cost escalations were going up 10-15%. So we've seen an increase in use, we've seen an increase in costs. And what we're needing to do is to determine whether that usage settles down a bit. So the cost will always only ever go up, but we need to assess whether that the usage comes down. So we might have a year or two here where we're probably going to be quite under, quite over as we kind of figure out where that's going to be. But but even considering that overage, we were still in a surplus mode. I think one of the questions typically is where are we for our structural surplus as you start to factor out one-time items, benefit holidays, and I believe we're in a small structural surplus right now. And that's not counting the student counts that we're gonna take in at the end of this week. So we're in a really good financial position. We've turned the corner. We stemmed some of the out of control costs, got the budgets under control, and are heading in a positive financial position.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Patrick. Trustee
It's,
Higgins.
for me, that's one of the most critical issues is if we're not always having to, rethink all of the ways we do business, but that we actually have a structural, positive, position rather than a negative one. So that, we're not always having to look where we're gonna cut and what we're gonna do next. So that's really good news.
Yeah.
For a bookkeeper, it's really good for our district as well, because programs don't have to be cut for the reason of no funding.
Yeah, and I know, and I also just want to highlight, like, again, when you go through a year of reductions, especially like we did, it does have its impacts, and we have to acknowledge that those cuts had impacts, but those cuts also helped make the difference to get the school district back into the position that it's in right now. So, because often when you start reducing, when we went from 8,000 students down to 5,000 students, every single year was a cut. So the situation that we as a board was in, I think we made some good decisions, and as far as taking care of the operating position and getting the board into today's position. So, and and one other thing that I need to make sure I don't forget, I mentioned Renee, Assistant Secretary Treasurer, who's currently on leave right now, but the person that replaced her has done a phenomenal job with a 1-year coverage. I think we got one of the most prepared people that just came in and has learning curve got picked up really, really quickly. And that's a huge reason for success why the audit team's able to come in and do their job. Because it's, even though we have the audit at the end of summer, it's a lot of work, and Jillian did a fabulous job being brand new at it.
Thank you. Trustee Gills?
Yeah, I think the public would be interested in knowing what your sense of where we are moving in terms of students is. Do you feel that there's cause for optimism? Have we reached the bottom of that turnaround? Have we pivoted and we're now attracting other bodies to our beautiful community?
So, yeah, I've always been nervous about the school districts that on the first board meeting will say, we're up this number of students, because I know they're wrong. And it's hard for an accountant to say, here's where we're at, because I know at this point the numbers are going to change by the time we get. But compared to where we projected, which was up 61 students, we are probably sitting slightly above that. We're not a huge growth like many island districts are, but we are in the positive. We're kind of in a slow growth mode, which when you talk to some of the fast growing districts is maybe a better place to be. But so we're positive though.
Thank you for that.
I'm wondering about the, if you could mention the enrollment on the island schools like Cortez or Surge or Quadra.
Cortez, it looks like it's going to be up. Quadra was actually down much more than we had expected through the pandemic. Surprisingly, a lot of families seem to have moved, at least that enrolled in our schools. But from last year to this year, we're seeing a good sized drop that is a concern. For Sayward, I think we're pretty flat, if not slightly up, so just stable on Cortez.
Thanks.
Surge is actually way up.
Oh.
So
Wow.
surprisingly, yes.
People move from quadrant to surge.
Maybe, yeah. Yes, but we will get final counts on Friday.
Okay.
Usually what happens when we get the final count is we lose some students
Mhm.
that are claimed in other districts that haven't notified us that have left. So that's why if I say a number, we'll want to maybe spend it or just be happy, but it will likely be a little bit less than less.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Secretary Treasurer, getting back to the special purpose funds around the Student and Family Affordability Fund and the Feeding Futures funding.
Mhm.
Is there a plan? Like, I know that they have different parameters for spending. Do we have, are our directors moving forward with some kind of plans around how we're going to utilize the Student and Family Affordability Fund?
So yes, there's a proposal tonight that might also potentially impact, but yeah, the planning that our staff did for the student and family was fairly in depth, and it was a lot of planning time went in. And even with that planning timing, it was still a struggle to spend appropriately on those types of programs. So for the Feeding Futures, it's gonna be an ongoing, I think it's like a 5-year commitment. We are gonna have to put some infrastructure in place to support. To plan is the first part. So we don't have a plan for Feeding Futures just yet, other than we're getting the pieces in place to make the plan. But we'll have something in place for this year and start the Feeding Futures. So yeah, there will be a lot involved in getting food out to all the schools. Absolutely.
Any further questions? Thank you very much to the finance team. We do have a motion that will come forth from the audit committee. I just want to state the public record that our financial statements are audited financial statements, as well as this plain language document that Secretary Treasurer Kevin Patrick created for stakeholders and community will be available on our website. So if you'd like to review the financial statements or have any questions, it's best directed to the Secretary Treasurer's office. And moving on to the motion from the audit, the recommendation from the audit committee. Trustee Briggs?
We recommend that the audit financial statement for the term ending June 30th, 2023, which includes the reserve transfers, be adopted as presented by Auditor Corey Vanderhorst from the firm MNP LLP.
We have a mover, please. Trustee Harper and a seconder. Trustee Gladish, all those in favor? And the budget, the audited financial statements have been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey.
Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. So moving on to item 12D, which is a recommendation for the extension of the auditor's contract. And that will go back to the audit committee as well. Motion 12D.
Ready? That the board recommends the extension of the auditor MNP LLP's contract for an additional 3-year term.
We have a mover. Trustee Gillis, seconded. Sorry, Trustee McMahon. All those in favor? And so moved. Congratulations.
Thank you,
Corey.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. So moving forward to business administration, we do have a maintenance and operations summer project update. Welcome, Jason.
Good evening, everyone. And just bear with me a moment while I bring up some slides.
Has the board met Jason? If not, I'd like to introduce Jason Baxman, our Director of Operations. Now, typically, we would like to start the year off, so in future years, we'll probably get it up to September 5th, but our maintenance staff do tons and tons of work. Again, like along with the finance staff that are not on holidays, they're working hard. Our summer staff do a lot of work, a lot of projects are coordinated. We ask a lot from contractors to avoid the interruption and disruption, and it's all overseen by our Director of Operations, Jason Becksheimer.
Great. So thank you for the intro, Kevin, and thank you for the floor. So tonight I'm here to just give the board a bit of a summary of the work that we did this summer. And Kevin stole a bit of my thunder. This is exciting for us. A summer, I have to say, I'm relatively new to the district. I'm also brand new to education, and coming in as a new district employee, it was I think it would be surprising to a lot of the members of the public to see how much effort and work goes in to make sure that come September, our schools are bright and shiny, working the way they're supposed to, the heat is on, etc. So tonight I'm just here to go over a few of the things that we worked on this summer and give some kudos to our entire operations team, primarily the maintenance, custodial, but also groups like our IT group that are doing things like installing video cameras at some of our schools, etc. So I'll start off with the big project. Obviously, we broke ground at 7 of our elementary sites this summer for construction of our childcare centers. A lot of effort went in, not only from the contractor this summer to try and get some of the heavy civil work and excavation work done this summer before school started. We didn't quite get there, but we were very close. But also a lot of utility servicing was happening. Our sites, for those of you and those of the public that were around, were torn up pretty heavily. And so there was a lot of effort just to get things up and going for September. That was the largest project we were working on this summer. And I'll come down in sort of scope and magnitude from there. Next is our minor capital items. These are all ministry funded in advance. So these are projects sort of in value from 100,000 up to in this year up to about $500,000. We did 3 major HVAC projects this summer. Almost finished them this summer. Up in Sayward, we replaced parts of the boiler plant and we upgraded our DEC controls. Controls are an important part of our heating and ventilation system. They not only allow our HVAC department to sort of manage the heating and ventilation of the building, but they're also really important for the energy efficiency piece. All the equipment we put in is modernized. It's very efficient. The boilers we put in are condensing boilers, which are sort of 95% efficient versus the 50-60% efficient boilers that we were replacing. But controls are a key piece of that. So you'll see that sort of featured throughout all these rooms. Next, and that's where these pictures are from, is at Southgate. We installed classroom unit ventilators in all of the C-wing classrooms, including the cooking kitchen. And we're about to finish up in the multi-purpose room as well. For a few extra dollars we were able to scrape up. But again, these are really important in ensuring that rooms are kept at a temperature that's great, good for learning and good ventilation rates, etc. And over on Quadra, we're a little late getting out of the game, but if I had pictures from Quadra, it would look very similar to this. We're just wrapping up this week over there, but there were quite a number, I think almost 10 classrooms were installed unit ventilators. And again, we've liberated a few more extra dollars from other projects to install, replace the really antiquated ventilation systems in the gym as well. Keeping in minor capital, we replaced 2 smaller sections of the roof at Southgate this year to the tune of, I think, around 5,000 square feet. When you consider we're about 1 million square feet across the whole district, it's really a drop in the bucket for our roofing portfolio. That is one area we're going to work with sort of in future years, subject to ministry funding. One aspect of the Southgate roof that we're trying to accomplish as part of this contract, which the contractor subsequently wasn't able to fit in, was the addition of a roof access fence. And so probably many of the board members are aware we have a lot of issues with unwanted visitors accessing this roof, and we're working with another contractor right now to install some systems that will hopefully reduce that risk and keep people off the roof. Moving on to AFG. AFG is our annual facilities grant, and this is really our major rehabilitation pool that we use to replace and repair many of sort of the base building systems throughout the district. So the rehabilitation of the Phoenix gym floor was sort of the biggest AFG funded project this year. The picture on the left was an old repair that has sort of just seen its time run out. And so this year we actually re-repaired that section resanded the entire gym, redid the lines and resurfaced it. They got an updated logo. The school's very happy with that fix. Keeping on the gym floors, the pictures on the left are before and after at EDM. This is one that we actually did with in-house resources. So gym floors are a huge asset for the district. They're huge dollars to replace, but you don't necessarily need to replace them if you have a good rehabilitation program and resurfacing program in place. So this is one we did, it was a joint effort by our paint and custodial teams, and this is one that going forward next year and beyond, we are going to target sending of those AFG funds towards rehabilitating gyms across the whole district. And the intent is that we would use in-house resources to do that. EDM also got a pretty sizable, not full, but pretty close to full exterior paint and a lot of painting on the interior as well. Our paint department was really busy this year. That south gate there where they're doing some other painting, covering up old vandals and things like that. One painting project that I am really happy to report on is we did a full refresh of the teacherage over at Surge. Pretty marked improvement. This is not the long-term solution for that teacherage. This building is the only teacherage left in the district. It's, from what I'm told, possibly up to like 60, 80 years old. It was brought there from another site, another island. And so we are looking at a long-term replacement for this structure. But in the meantime, the teacher that has to live in this teacherage has a little bit of a nicer place to do so. Our carpentry department was busy. We did cladding repairs, replacements at a number of schools, including this is at Ripple Rock. Cladding's an important one. It not only protects the envelope from, you know, water penetration, physical damage from all sorts of manner of things that get tossed at schools, whether that's rocks or balls or what have you. But it also helps to refresh the school. And so on the picture on the right, you can actually see some sections of the original cladding. You can paint it, but certainly it provides a lot brighter, fresher look for students when they're coming into school that first day of September. Carpentry department was busy doing flooring. Again, we did flooring at, I think, 4 or 5 schools this year. The biggest one was 5 classrooms at Timberline, which these pictures are from. I didn't get a picture of the classrooms before, but it would have been the broadloom carpet that you see on the left. And that carpet's difficult to maintain by our custodial team. You'll see patches there. And it is I'm going to say a little unsightly. So the modern standard that we've transitioned to is a put together vinyl plank. It's easy to install. It's very easy to maintain. It's robust. It's a commercial standard. And like I said, we did 5 classrooms there at Timberline this year. So keeps everyone happy. I don't want to leave out our grounds department. Grounds department was kept busy by the pitch. These are actually separate pictures, although they look like they're split of the same. But the picture on the right is at Georgia Park. And I do want to highlight the efforts our grounds department assisted with. Like I said, with construction of 7 childcare centers, as you can imagine, and probably some of you saw, there was a bit of tearing up of some of our sites. And so the grounds department was really helpful keeping that safe for students. The picture on the left is Kerry High, and the reason I'm highlighting this is, again, turf grass is one of those assets that we do need to do regular maintenance and keep it watered over the summer to ensure that's in a high standard. Even though there's not a huge school use in July and August, I'm including this picture. I want to highlight, I received some some unsolicited feedback from an executive on the senior softball local community group that told me the grounds at Kerry High as they play baseball this summer were the best they ever could remember them being. So shout out to the grounds crew there. And last but certainly not least is the work that goes in by our custodial team over the summer. Again, I was like Superintendent Manning, I was to most of our schools this summer, and our custodial team over the summer, for those in the public or board that aren't aware, the schools pretty much get a full cleaning, sanitizing, wipe down from almost floor to ceiling throughout the summer. All surfaces are washed down. The floors are stripped, re-waxed, resealed, and I'm really proud of the work our custodial team does every summer too. So that is sort of a highlight of really some of the big work that goes on. Of course, there's hundreds and hundreds of work orders that get done throughout the summer. When we can get to them without students in there is our best opportunity to do so. So that concludes my presentation, and certainly if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you.
Very nice. Interesting.
Thank you so much for sharing the huge amount of work that maintenance and operations take on over the summer. We do see them, of course, daily in our schools, fixing and painting and cleaning, and deeply appreciative of the work that they do over the summer months. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
So moving on to agenda item 14B, which is the capital plan response letter and bylaw number 2324. Kevin.
So this one is actually really exciting. This is an amended capital bylaw that was passed by the board in spring. And so there's a couple of new money items in this. The first one is the feeding futures. We had asked for $100,000 for a delivery vehicle and a kitchen upgrade to support the feeding futures program. And there is some $30,000 additional for electric bus application that we were successful. The electric buses are quite a bit more expensive than a traditional bus, which we got funding for traditional bus, and through a series of grants, additional grants that are coming in, it won't lead to out-of-pocket expenses from the board. And that's a very huge subsidy. So we'll get an additional $30,000 for that. But the one that I'm really excited about was the $65,000 for charging station upgrades. So Jason was checking in with ministry staff on a Monday. That we were told that if we could get our application in, documents uploaded by Tuesday, that we would get $65,000. So this is a project that we were planning on anyways. And with the quick work of Jason and myself getting the documents up, we're getting $65,000 this year to work on this. So, and that is just being prepared, keeping those communication lines open. It's really about caring about the work you're doing and trying, doing everything you can to see things through. But that was I think a big success. And a really nice catch, because I don't think it was open to all districts. It was the timing, the opportunity, and the effort at the right time to get that. So this is a bylaw. This means we got 4 readings potentially. But once the board approves this bylaw, we'll have the money in our accounts like next week. So yeah, so this is a really nice one. We have another capital plan coming. I'll speak to that at that time, but in the motions, we've got the series of bylaw motions to approve that for tonight.
So just a quick question, Secretary Treasurer Patrick, the $65,000, seeing that we'll be getting, we're working on an electric bus, will that charging station be going at the works yard?
These electric charging stations, I believe, we're going to be using at schools for school charging stations. Are we going to have one of them will be at maintenance for the commercial?
The largest, like this is a funded capital minor capital item right now. I didn't speak to it because we haven't quite started it yet. The lion's share of the expense will be in our maintenance yard, so we're looking at some fairly high voltage equipment there to charge our buses fast and turn them around as needed. We are also looking at installing potentially a station here. We are looking at installing stations at Sayward Elementary and also possibly Cortez. But this money, subject to us getting it, will just essentially allow us to augment all of those systems everywhere. There's a very sliding scale of expense in terms of how much capacity the charging infrastructure has to charge a bus quickly. And it does escalate quickly as we go on. So we're just working through with a vendor right now.
Thank you for clarifying that. Oh.
What are we charging besides buses?
Yeah, it is just buses right now. So right now we have confirmed funding through the ZETF fund, which is a federal infrastructure fund that we're likely to receive funding over the next 3 years for replacing 3 of our buses with electric buses. So we want to be prepared to do that and essentially get ahead of the game for charging. We are receiving 1 electric bus this fall. That's already in the works, hoping to receive it before November. And the intent is that we trial that bus on a number of different routes, including potentially the Sabre route. We want to maximize how much we're using that to reduce as much as possible the sort of gas diesel consumption. And so, yeah, right, it is primarily buses, right? Yeah.
Any further questions? Fascinating. Thank you so much for your work.
Thanks, Jason.
Need to be able to get the bus back.
Yes, bus needs to be able to come back. Because this is a bylaw, for the first motion is that we'll have to approve unanimously that all three readings be given at this meeting. So the initial motion reads that the capital plan bylaw number 202324 CPSD 7202 for projects identified in the September 15th, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education be given all three readings at this meeting. Moved by trustee McMahon, seconded by trustee Hagan. All those in favor? So that speaks to us being able to read all three this evening. And I have to read it 3 times and
If you think,
Acronyms.
yeah, you can use acronyms, but as long as there's a first and a second and a vote for each one, then that's sufficient.
okay, so I'll read it in its entirety the first time and then we'll go through it. That the capital plan bylaw 2023-24 CPSD 7202 for projects identified in the September 15th, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the first time, forwarded by trustee Hagan, seconded by trustee Gillis. All those in favor? The second reading that the capital plan bylaw 23-24 CPSD 7202 for projects identified in the September 15th, 23 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the second time. Trustee Gladish, trustee McMahon, all those in favor? And the final reading that the capital plan bylaw number 2324 CPSD 7202 for projects identified in the September 15th, 23 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the third time, passed and adopted. May I have a mover? Trustee Harper, seconded by trustee McMahon. All those in favor? Thank you for pausing, guys. All right. Wow, that's
Okay.
excellent.
That is.
So moving down to, a number of finance warrants.
Oh, no, we have another capital, so. You
Minor
just
capital
approved.
plan submission.
Yeah, you just
Sorry, I
approved
missed
capital
that.
for this year. And now we are looking for a motion to support submission of next year's minor capital application for 24-25. And so what we have here is Jason had mentioned a bunch of different projects that were funded. The amount of funding for these programs has definitely changed from the years of all of it having to be done under AFG to them providing funding for each additional project. As roof projects went from $50,000 up to $500,000, our annual facility grant wasn't enough. So they provide opportunities under school protection, school enhancement program. There's a carbon neutral plan. There's a bus application fund, and there's a new school replacement fund, or a playground fund, I should say. The new school and major additions are actually a major capital. This is just the minor capital. So you can see what we have down for our various priorities. So we'll ask for these 11 projects. We'll typically get funded for 3 or 4 of them. But it's important to show them and that they know what's coming and what we'll be asking for in the future. But each year we have a chance to redistribute our priorities. But we have HVAC requests. We have our top priority for playground, which typically we get approved for every second year at Cortez. And we have school enhancement roofing projects, Sayward, Phoenix, and around the district. So this is typically supported by a resolution and just a resolution. If for the items that get approved, will require a bylaw at a later time.
So can you just remind me, Secretary Treasurer Patrick, when that major capital asks, when they,
We submitted that in the springtime.
so
So
it's the
we,
spring of
we
every
submitted
year?
early, yeah, and they need that advance time for follow-up with questions and, because school builds are such a long, big project, they want to make sure they get those estimates in as close as possible. Whereas the estimates that we provide for these are, like more local estimates and there's much shorter timeline, so there's less risk of, them funding too little.
Thank you. So the motion in front of me regarding the approval of the minor capital plan reads that the board approved the 24-25 minor capital plan submission as outlined in the summary provided by Secretary Treasurer Patrick. May I have a mover? Trustee Harper, seconded by Trustee Gillis. All those in favor? Excellent. Okay, so now we're on to, I've got lots and lots of motions tonight. Now we're on to our finance warrants. So there will be three months worth of finance warrants to accept. April 30th, May 31st, and June 30th, 2023. I just want to note that we are one of the few districts in the province that do the finance warrants, but it is seen as good practice. Because it gives us eyes on the actual numbers on a regular basis. So finance warrant number 10 of April 30th, that the finance warrant number 10 dated April 30th be accepted as presented. Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Brick. All those in favor? Thank you. Finance warrant number 11, that the finance warrant number 11 dated May 31st, 2023 be accepted as presented. Trustee Gladish, Trustee Gillis, all those in favor? And finally, that the finance warrant number 12 dated June 30th, 2023 be accepted as presented. Trustee Briggs, Trustee Hagan, all those in favor? Thank you. So we're on to 14G, which is an added item. The proposal for district principal on behalf of student services. Who would like to speak to that?
I've got this.
Okay, Superintendent, yeah.
As we discussed briefly in our previous meeting, the numbers of students receiving designations has rise dramatically from our spring projections, and which is great, but providing them service is becoming a bit of an issue. And in our learning services department, it was felt that we had a need for a district principal to help the director of learning services manage the growing population. And when we do a comparison to other districts our size, we've seen other districts using the same parameters, same format, same structures to deal with this problem. And in some districts, they have a much larger team that deals with learning services or inclusive education, as it's called in some districts. So I believe the proposal is warranted, and it's something that would be very beneficial to the students in our school district, especially those with diverse needs that need some really specialized attention.
And do we have a motion to bring forward for?
Just to speak to the proposal. The estimated cost for the position for a year, and I just want to confirm that it's a permanent ongoing addition, is $200,000. We have identified about $30,000 that was approved at the last budget in spring for the childcare principal support that we don't need because we ended up getting additional funding for that will be able to use to offset the new budget allocation, as well as there was a portion that was going to come out of Feeding Futures. So we would take, there's basically $50,000 within the existing budget that will help offset it. So we'd be looking for a budget addition approval from the board of $150,000. Of course, that is supported by the $600,000 expected increase in various increases in categories.
Trustee Hagan?
Yeah, remind me again how how this section of our budget is, how big it is. It's a fairly large chunk of what we actually spend.
Yeah, it is, it's.
I think it's our largest, isn't it?
For a single department, absolutely. It is bigger than any single school. The staffing is quite high. I'm just trying to, so let's take a look at the total cost. We're looking at like, yeah, $11 million for the learning support services budget. And that has all of our educational assistants in it. It has professional services, speech and language pathologists, counselors are included in this budget and with this department. So yeah, it is quite substantial.
I think it's very timely that we've seen a huge increase this year. And this will help stem the tide. For us to get through this year. And the quicker we do it, I believe the quicker that we can make the transition, because there will be some bumping along the way, depending on who gets the position. And so I think it's, what kind of a motion do you actually need from the board?
So this, we'll need a motion for the board to approve the expenditure of $150,000. At this point in this motion tonight, it'll be from surplus, but we know that it will be from operating revenues.
So you don't need a motion tonight, and you can go ahead with our intent, or?
No, I would appreciate a motion tonight.
So moved.
So moved and seconded by trustee. And just for the record, the motion reads that the board approves the $150,000 ask
budget increase.
Budget increase to support the district principal position for student services. Something like that, student services.
Learning support services, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just need to point out, as you kind of had mentioned something as well, the budget heading into this year had a substantial addition with learning support services with our in-reach outreach team and proposal. So the budget additions that we made on the operating side were quite small, about $80,000 net new. There were some grants in there, but we had also had the addition, and we spoke a lot of the in-reach outreach programs, which was a $900,000 increase last year. So this $600,000 is in addition to that $900,000. So we're seeing some very substantial changes year to year post-pandemic that is in our schools, that we're seeing needs in our schools every day.
Speaking to the motion, sorry.
No, I just wanted to thank Secretary Treasurer Patrick for that information, because I think these dollars in essence are generated by needs of students who are in our system. And I think it's really important given the increasing complexities that we see. We have 150, I believe, educational assistants working in our district, which speaks to tremendous needs and of course, coordination of those needs and supports. And so I think this is a very important statement on behalf of our board.
Yes.
Just speaking to the motion on the table, I'm so glad that we actually have some funding, because this is part of our most sensitive group of children in the district. And that we would actually have the extra money still running in a positive budget and make this proposal tonight is really quite exciting. That it's not just good enough to say, there's a quote in the Bible, be ye warmed and filled, but we can actually do something, and hopefully somebody's gonna have something on their table tonight instead of just telling them, boy, we wish you well.
And if I may speak to the motion as well, it's my understanding that this new position will also take care of the Feeding Futures funding, will help to oversee that structuring so that we are actually meeting the needs of some of our most,
Yes, that is a portion of the funding that was accounted for in reducing it from 200 to 150.
so if it starts as surplus at $150,000 in next year's budget, it will roll into the operating funds or?
Yeah, yeah, we will include it in when I bring an amended budget forward in February. It will be included in it.
All right. So voting on, oh, sorry, trustee.
No, I just wanted to speak to, the urgency of us to move forward with this and appreciate the motion to do that.
Okay. Trustee Gladys?
I look forward to hearing about the impact of this new position on our ability to meet the needs of the children who need this kind of special help in our district.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd like to bring the motion to vote that the board approves, what was the motion again? $150,000
$150,000.
to support the district principal of learning support services. All those in favor? So moved.
Can I just ask you to repeat who the seconder was, please?
Trustee Rose.
So I have.
Oh, you have that too.
Yeah. All right, so we can check in tomorrow.
Awesome. So on to 15A, which are committee reports, just really quickly, audit conversation report. As board chair, I'm contacted by MNP. I was contacted in August with some broad questions around trustees' confidence in the financial data, whether we were concerned about any fraudulent activities. There was a description that it was a clear audit, but it does happen every year. They contact the board chair every year as they're doing their audit. So I just wanted to share that with the public and with the rest of the board that happened at the end of August. Mm-hmm. And on to 15B, DPAC committee report.
Well, I want to say that I find this, a really pleasant group to attend in terms of the scope of understanding what, the dynamics of schools might be and what questions are on the minds of parents. I really appreciate the attendance. Superintendent Manning was at the last meeting, Deborah Coates, Andrea Craddock, Deborah as representative of Campbell River District Teachers Association, and Andrea from our local QP. Also, Associate Superintendent Phil Sismic is also there. So the conversation is often quite organic. It kind of flows and pops in all kinds of different directions. But over the course of the evening, I think we cover a lot of ground. And I always leave feeling really differently informed about what's going on and appreciate the issues that are on the minds of parents. One of the really kind of powerful issues that came up in this last meeting was around bullying, not necessarily in schools, but in general, in a community where, tensions can run high amongst young people, and there are victims on both sides of the bullying equation, and just the challenges of trying to manage that, not only as a school district, but as a community as a whole. I don't know that we came up with any solutions, but I think the DPAC reps there are keen to look at ways in which we can bring some kind of information to the broader community that will help us be on the same page in terms of addressing that. They're looking at speakers and presentations, ways in which they can get word out about the existing programs that are available. Lots to talk about the childcare programs coming on stream. Yeah, it's a great group.
You trustee McMahon. I have no doubt that it is a great group. What was participation?
I think they're looking to build. It was the first meeting of the season, and so, some PACs have not yet had their first meeting, so representation was a bit spotty. Communication is a challenge that they are trying to work through, how to get, the word out of both the work of PACs and then the, subsequent representation from those PACs onto DPAC. It's in the time that I've been involved in it, which is off and on over the last 15 years, it kind of goes up and down. It's a challenge. People are very busy, and people with school age children have them in hockey and dance, and, you know, they've got their family responsibilities. So it's tough to get someone to give up their valuable time to be part of that. So it'll be a challenge that they're trying to address, both through whether to provide meetings through Zoom or whether to have them in person. I think they're looking at some kind of a hybrid model or alternating model, or, yeah.
Very interesting. You just plucked my question. Make sure my thoughts are. Yes, I was going to ask if were you looking at a hybrid model where people could attend from home rather than in person?
Babysitting challenges and what have you, yeah.
Thank you for your report, trustee McMahon. On to 16A, which is under any other business. And I'd like to welcome trustee Gladish to bring forward the article regarding Chat GPT and AI in the classroom.
Okay. Well, I read that article and then I spent most of a Saturday night how to have fun exploring it and playing with it. So, you know, I didn't realize that, you know, this app Chat GPT has been around since November 22. It's been out for about a year. So maybe I'm slow, but I just found out about it not that long ago. But I was reading the article and I was listening to CBC and listening to kids talk about how they could use it to help them with their homework. Or they could, you know, put a prompt in it and get some good ideas about how to write an essay that's due like in 2 hours. So it was very fascinating for us, quite surprised about it. It brought to mind the potential for maybe academic dishonesty or plagiarism. And I wondered about, you know, how many of our teachers in schools are kind of paying attention to it. Because let's face it, some, you know, being a former high school teacher, some of us pay attention to technology. Others, you know, wonder what cut and paste was when we first started having to do our marks online. But when I heard some teachers being interviewed on the CBC, they said there is some potential for it being useful in classrooms, but also there are some limitations because it only goes to 2021 in terms of current information. So that was really interesting for me. So Saturday night, I got my popcorn and I sat down and I asked it to write a poem. I gave it a prompt and lo and behold, it wrote a poem and it was not bad. I was
Not
really
as good
shocked.
as you would have said.
And then I asked it to write an essay. So it wrote quite a well-constructed 5-paragraph essay. And then when I read it, I gave it a prompt. I thought, well, okay, this is fine, but some of it maybe isn't that accurate. Yeah. So anyway, I just was very, very interested. So I plugged in something that I had personally written because I write for fun. And I asked to do an improvement on it. Well, it was so good. It made me feel like a failure as a writer. But what was missing was my voice. Like my voice was not in it. It was someone else's voice. So it was very fascinating for me. So then I decided to call my son, who teaches math and calculus and all that at a post-secondary institution. And I said, what are you guys doing about this? He said, you know, we're just mostly ignoring it in his department, math department. He said, it's not good for problem solving. So I went in, I asked it to do a problem for me, and it was quite a simple problem. It got it wrong. So there's a chance for it to have a second try at it, and got it right the second time. So, you know, I just thought, oh gosh, we need to kind of pay attention to it. We need to sort of find out what is the potential for its use or misuse in schools. You know, how do we make it helpful to assist or enhance learning or to personalize learning? And how do we make sure that, you know, we're just not getting the wool pulled over our eyes by kids who really know how to put in good prompts. So anyway, I just wondered what other people had to say about it, and I had a bit of a motion, but I'm not sure if we want to have a discussion before the motion, or how do you want to do this, Chair?
I'd like to invite Superintendent Manning to speak to some of the
Okay.
experiences first, and then we'll talk about motion.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a fantastic topic, and then I have to assure you that it is on the top of the minds
okay,
of many teachers and administrators in our school district. At our last leadership meeting, we posed the question to our secondary and middle school principals and said, hey, can you go do some research, find out, you know, what your staff is thinking and how things are going and what you're thinking about progressing forward. Heard back from several of them already saying they've had really in-depth staff discussions, and many staff members feel like it can be used for very good reasons. And they feel, just as you were saying, what was missing, the voice, is something that teachers can determine. I think when you're playing around with that, if a teacher, there are ways for a teacher to get around this media and this source, because they know what their kids are capable of coming in. And if they have them do an in-class essay, let's say, or in-class piece of writing, they can compare it fairly easily. But what was really interesting to me was a lot of the teachers want to explore using that and seeing how can we use this in a proactive, positive way. And I know administration has been sitting down and meeting with them, looking at this exact topic, because it's not going away, that's for sure. And it will probably only get better, the technology.
Mr. Gillis?
Well, I did a lot of thinking, and I thank Trustee Gladys for bringing this argument to our attention. And I'm just a great fundamental believer in the power of an educator to make those decisions about how they process the challenges. I mean, I guess in my Luddite days, it was plagiarism, you know, and we were looking very carefully at that. But I really always found, as primarily a humanities teacher, that I did know the voice of my students. That's why I had them using, you know, a daily journal for a quick write, or you get to know the style. And I think it really, when we know the article, actually, I want to point out one of the statements of the article said, this is Tarbuck says she's spending more time familiarizing herself with students' academic abilities and writing styles. And I thought, isn't that a wonderful thing? Because what she's saying is, I don't see this as a threat, but I see this as a challenge. How do I get to know my students even better? And then there was another statement that said, when kids cheat, they do so because they think they can't do the work, or they really don't know where to start. And so a lot of it is, let's get you started. Let's help you walk up those steps to that learning. And so that was affirming for me, because I think sometimes we all need a prompt every once in a while, or a writing cue or something that helps us take the steps further. I guess maybe I'm a bit naive, but I'm still a fundamental believer that teachers know their students, and they figure it out. You know, we had to figure out how to deal with Walkmans and Discmans. You know? We had to figure out how to deal with hats, you know, when you couldn't see a kid's eyes when you were teaching. We're always fraught with some new challenges, and I think this is a new one. And I'm not suggesting it's not something that needs to be paid attention to, but I think by having those very conversations in schools, people will probably develop some kind of tools or approaches that will help them feel that they're getting to know their students and they're helping their students move forward. That so closer.
Any other comments? Do you feel as if the conversations at the administration level answered your query?
Actually, I really do want a little bit more. You know,
Okay.
as a board, I think we should be apprised and highly informed about things such as this.
Okay,
So I will read my motion and
Absolutely.
see if I can get a seconder and see what you think. I mean, we can always adapt the motion. That our senior staff begin a process of exploring the capability of something like Chat GPT, and report back to the board on its use and potential misuse in classrooms.
I can look at that.
Are you?
I'll second that.
Trustee Gillis will be seconding the motion.
Again,
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
sure.
Okay. Motion passed. It's fascinating. And that brings us to the end of this evening's agenda. Are there any questions? One question, Deb Coots?
Can you tell me why the budget amendment motion was not on the agenda?
Because it was an added motion. As Kevin, the budget agenda for the district principal.
Yes.
So that is a dynamic situation, and due to the time constraints and the shuffling that will potentially take place in schools to fill that district principal position, we brought it forward at the public meeting prior to the presentation that will come forth at the October 17th meeting to start the posting process. That's why it wasn't on. So we discussed it in the confidential meeting and brought it forward to the public meeting so that it was public knowledge and it was in public domain, and we weren't just stuck speaking to it in the confidential.
So the question is it a done deal then?
The motion approves the budget to create the position. Welcome. Are there any further questions coming in online?
No, there've been no questions online.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Trustee Hagan,
Hey,
motion to adjourn.